Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Rangers YouTube for the Dallas Morning News. I'm Evan Grant. We did have some technical issues, so I'm sorry we're getting on just a few minutes late. And let me run through the disclaimers really quick. If you're a first time viewer here, love the questions, love the comments. It's been great stuff. If you can, please, if you're a first timer, subscribe to the channel that you are on right now. That is our best way of getting approval. Offer your comments on what I offer you today so I can improve um, in the comments below. And hey, like us as well. That all of that is great for us. So with that, let's get into a little bit of Rangers talk. I'm going to wait for some questions to populate here very quickly. But I want to go over a couple things really quickly. Just the takeaway from this just completed Pirates series. And my biggest takeaway from this is what we really saw was a snippet of what the Rangers believe Evan Carter can do. Um, he can be a game changing player. He changed the series against Pittsburgh with two real energy burst kind of plays. Obviously, the home run catch against O'Neill Cruz in the opener that was followed by a big outburst offensively that helped put that game away. And then the inside the park home run on Thursday that, again, also really kind of gave this team an offensive surge. So it's a glimmer of what Evan Carter is truly capable of, which is being a game changing player. All of that said, there's still the issue of that will he play against left-handers? Can he find a way to contribute? He doesn't have to change games against lefties, but he does have to find a way to contribute against lefties. Secondly, obviously, he's still got to stay on the field. Um, and he has done a great job of that early this year, being ready every day, uh, being ready to go. And I think there is a real possibility here for this to be a special player. We've seen snippets of it in 2023 during the World Series and the postseason, and we've seen a snippet of it in this Pittsburgh series. And if he can continue to put together some of these kinds of performances, it offers some really, really special abilities. So with that, let me get to some questions because they're starting to pop in. I don't want to fall too far behind. Charles Tucker, a regular, is said something very kind. He's a big fan of my work. Still love your story about your dad. Yes, we'll run that back on Father's Day every year, even if it's not in the actual paper. I love to tweet that back out because it's the most special story I ever wrote about taking my dad to his last baseball game. That was a really special moment. Now, for the question, Rangers seem to be doing okay without a closer compared to those with one. Will one settle in from within? Charles, I don't. I think that the bullpen has done yeoman kind of work so far. I do think that nobody has stepped forward as the closer. I've been very impressed with what Gavin Collier has done in I think it's three outings at this moment. Um, but I'm certainly not going to hand over all the leverage innings to Gavin Collier at this very moment. Jacob Latz is doing a great job out there. But and Tyler Alexander is really kind of flown under the radar, but he's been really effective. Um, but to all of that, I still think that there's some level of uncertainty is not the right word. It's just scrambling because there's no definitive closer. And I don't know that unless everything went right, unless you went into the season with Chris Martin and Robert Garcia, they had seized it from the very beginning and held on to it. I just don't know that um, I would have expected anybody to really cement their roles in concrete almost 4 weeks into the season. I do think um, that there have been some bright spots, and I do think that Jacob Latz and Gavin Collier are going to continue to get opportunities. I think the Rangers will be a little bit more. Um, they'll protect Gavin Collier a little bit more as he continues to get some time. but he certainly has shown the ability to be a late inning kind of weapon. But I think that's going to evolve a little bit more as we go along. And yeah, I think that at some point in time, if this team is serious about contending this year and if they play well, they're going to need to add another reliever or two. They knew that going into the season. I just hate to think that, you know, not having the extra relievers going into the season might cost them some games at the outset that puts them not in a position to add at the trade deadline. Um, Try to wrap your head around that for a moment. But I do think that so far most of the guys out there have been doing really good work. Uh, there's just not a closer. And to your point, Edwin Diaz is out for at least 4 months after signing a really big deal with the Dodgers, and there have been some other guys who haven't had a lot of success early on. As the season goes on, you would like to think that fixing the bullpen, while never easy, is the easiest area to address as the season progresses. And so that's what we'll look for. Let's move on here. Like the addition of Danny Jansen, he seems to be a better communicator and more proactive with the pitchers. This is from Richard Wyndham. Still wish they would have used the Chris Martin dollars on Sean Armstrong. Danny Jansen and Kyle Higashioka really have been working well with these pitchers. And I think they've been working well with each other. I think the catching tandem has really good chemistry. I think that's important too, that while one guy is out there catching on whoever's pitching that night, I think both of those two guys communicate, and it's a big help. And I don't know what the Jonah Heim dynamic was like last year. I think we've all talked about this, and I don't want to bury Jonah too much, but the body language just wasn't good. And so you wonder if that ever leaked over into the communication aspect. Nobody ever said he wasn't a good communicator with the other catchers, but I do really like what I've seen from Jansen and Higashioka, how loose they keep things, but how serious they are about the work they're doing for these pitchers. So I think it's been plus. As for the Chris Martin, Sean Armstrong situation, I too was a big advocate for re-signing Sean Armstrong. I thought he did a huge amount of work last year, and I thought he was really, really important in helping that bullpen come together. I think he's a great chemistry guy. I think he was super effective against right-handed hitters last year. Do I view him as a closer? Well, he saved 9 games for the Rangers, which is as many as anybody got last year. I don't view him as a prototypical closer, but he certainly got the job done when asked to, and wouldn't hesitate for the Rangers to have used him in that role going into the season. And to your point, while Chris Martin has good stuff, great stuff on occasion, I think there's just a better track record these days of Sean Armstrong being available and reliable. Chris has had any number of arm issues over the last couple of years. Wasn't available on a regular basis to the Rangers last year. And the only thing I can say is that Armstrong got $5 million up front from Cleveland. Chris Martin got $5 million from the Rangers, but only 2 of that, or I think he got $4 million from the Rangers. Only 2 of it was up front. The other 2 is deferred. And it's a savings of some degree for the Rangers. Not a huge savings, but it's a savings. So I don't know what the right call would have been there financially, but I agree. Sean Armstrong was a really important part of this bullpen last year, and I would have loved to have seen him back. Doug wants to know, well, he knows that Corey Seager is struggling at the plate. And listen, I think we need to say that this was as bad a start as Corey Seager has had to a season, as certainly when he was healthy all winter after that late year appendectomy. But he's been off to a slow start. Last night, Thursday night against Pittsburgh, the home run, big blast for Corey. He had a pair of hits and 3 RBIs. So hopefully for him, it's starting to heat back up. But my point on all this is Corey Seager and Wyatt Langford are the two best hitters in this, are the two best players on this team, and they're the two. They have the most ability to directly impact games offensively, and until they get on hot streaks, it's going to be, I don't want to say a struggle for the Rangers, but it's going to take a number of guys performing at or better than their career norms for the offense to really move. So I think it's imperative for Corey to step it up at the plate. Um, and to your question about his defense has been top notch, uh, yeah, it's been good. I think Corey gets unfairly characterized because he's such a good offensive shortstop and he's so big. I think sometimes he gets characterized, or not characterized, but underrated as a defensive shortstop. He is always in the right place, always makes a good feed. He had an error the other night on a ground ball, but he's as good a defensive shortstop as there is in baseball in my mind. He just doesn't make the flashy plays, and part of that is positioning. There are some guys with better range, but I think Corey is as reliable as you're going to get when it comes to fielding the ground balls that a shortstop should get to. So that's that, Doug. I hope that answers that question for you. I will say that the Rangers defense as a whole has not been, for me, stellar. I think they've made 11 errors in their first 25 games, and it puts them on pace for an increase of over 20 from last year when they did set a major league record for fielding percentage. They were spectacular last year. I think Corey has been fine at shortstop. I think that Josh Smith has not been off to a great defensive start, and I think that's shined more light on his lack of offense for some reason, because the Rangers are giving up defense without Marcus Semien out there, and if Josh was playing really top notch defense, I think that they could overlook the slower start for a little bit easier. He hasn't played great defense to this point. There have been just a couple of plays that have stuck out, and again, it's a small sample size early on, but I do think the Rangers need for him to both improve offensively and for them to show them more defensively, because right now, or at least going into yesterday, he was a negative WAR player early in the season, but the Rangers don't want to have negative WAR players up the middle. So I hope that answers everything, Doug. We're going to go down the line a little bit here to DStev 16. I don't know what that stands for. Is Josh Sborz injury over 2023 postseason use? Josh has never indicated that any theory that he thought it was. And I don't think that there is any way to categorize that he was overused in the postseason. But look, with the expanded playoffs and the 162 game season, there is more wear and tear on relievers and less time to recover. And so I wonder, I guess for me, if there's any question about anything, you take a month out of your recovery period in the off season, and then you try and still recover and then ramp back up. Maybe that has an impact, and I think that's more realistic than to think that there was something lingering from his use in 2023. I think it's more the idea that a guy didn't really get all the work or didn't get all the recovery time that you would have liked to see. So that answers one of your questions. Let's go down a little bit. I'll get back to some of these, but I'm trying to make sure I get everybody in here. Josh Jackson, what is it that makes DeGrom feel the need to give up a home run before he shuts down a team for the rest of the game? All jokes aside, what's an underlying trend you see in the bullpen, good or bad? Listen, Jacob, the last 2 years, if there's been any negative to Jacob's performance, it's been that he's given up more home runs than he had at any point in time in his career. I think the biggest takeaway from that is, look, his fastball's now 96 to 98 as opposed to 99 to 102. And so I think that there are more guys who are able to catch up with it. He challenges guys early. If guys prove that they're able to catch up with it, he very quickly makes an adjustment on location and on pitch selection. And so I think he's as effective as he's ever been. Um, but I think that, there is less ability to just challenge guys with the fastball all game long. He's got to mix his pitches better. I think he's used a changeup a little bit more so far this year than he had in the past. And obviously his slider is world class. So he's just having to mix up pitch sequencing a little bit better. And if there are guys who just sit on the fastball, somebody may run into one. And I think that's what's happened there. As for the other question, what's an underlying trend you see in the bullpen, good or bad? Uh, Again, for me, it's not so much trends. It's just it's unproven for a lot of these guys how much workload they can handle, um, and that is going to only play out over time. I think the Rangers are trying to do what they can to get guys rest, but you've had a rash of injuries out there with Martin, Crivello, Carter Baumler, and most recently Robert Garcia. And you've also got some guys. Cal Quantrill wasn't available for a couple of days after he pitched 3 innings. Jacob Junis, occasionally needs a day off. You can't pitch Jacob Latz 3 days in a row all season long. So I think that's the thing that I'm watching most is the usage of these guys and how frequently the Rangers can get to them. I've liked what I've seen again out of Latz. I've liked what I've seen out of Gavin Collier. Cole Winn has not been as effective against right-handers as he was last year when he was second only in the big leagues to Sean Armstrong. So we'll see what's going on there with Cole. And, I think Cole Winn is getting a few more leverage types innings than he did last year because in essence he was so good against right-handers last year that in essence he's kind of replacing the role that Sean Armstrong had going into the year, which is higher leverage, multiple innings, and that kind of thing. And so far he's struggled a little bit with it. Not overly, but he has struggled. So hope that answers the question. Richard Jones. I have been a fan of the way Skip uses the bench. Seems like most guys get into the game 4 or 5 times a week. Exception is Haggerty. Any idea why he doesn't seem to come into the rotation more? Um, well, I just the real thinking here, Richard, I think is that he's your best speed option off the bench. So you're going to save him if you need to run for somebody, probably the last. Uh, you don't want to put him in a situation where opponents can have any ability to go to a right-hander because his splits so much favor him against left-handers. And, you look at what the Rangers do, it's not very often that you're going to make multiple switches at a position in the course of a game unless you have to pinch run for somebody. So if you swap out, let's say, McCutchen for Peterson, or you swap out Duran for Smith, or you swap out who am I overlooking here on the bench? I'm not sure I'm overlooking anybody at the moment, but my point is that usually you even in mid game, those are your switches, and unless you're looking for speed or a contact play, and we saw a little bit of that with Haggerty last week, where he got into games as a pinch hitting option, partly because McCutchen had struggled in the pinch hitting option, partly because I think the Rangers wanted contact, and he's good at making contact. But yeah, he has not been as used quite as much as he was last year, and I really think it just comes down to the fact that the Rangers haven't faced many lefties, and that's the case for Andrew McCutchen as well. Duran has played more often because he's spelled Young when he was struggling early. He spelled Smith. He spelled Wyatt Langford in left field, so he's gotten more opportunity to play. But I think for the other guys, it's simply a matter of not having many opportunities against lefties. Let's go back to D-Stev, who is asking, why is it the industry norm to protect young lefty hitters against lefty pitchers? How can lefty hitters get to MLB with such a deficiency? Well, I think a big part of it is that it's just much harder for a left-hander to see the ball coming out of a left-hander's arm. And so that's why platoon splits, I think, tend to be so much more heavily favored for right-handed hitters against lefties, and you don't see the enormous split of a negative variety when righties face right-handers. So it's always been, I think we're platooning more than ever, but I think that's always been the case, is that, you know, lefties are gonna get some protection until they make the most out of whatever opportunities they get. In the case of Evan Carter, in this particular case, and I'm guessing that's what you're referring to, but in the case of Evan Carter, his at-bats against right-handed pitching are phenomenal. His at-bat quality against lefties is a little bit, it leaves something to be desired, and that goes, you know, the strikeouts are higher, the lack of walks is there, and so it just suggests that he's just not seeing the ball against left-handed pitchers. All that said, you know, I think the Rangers want to get him more opportunities against lefties, but you look at most of the lefties they've faced in this first 4 weeks, and they've been elite lefties. And if you're going to sit guys out, you're going to sit lefties out against elite lefties. And it's not going to get any easier since you've got Jeffrey Springs in all likelihood this weekend against the A's, and then you've got Max Fried probably twice in the next 10 days during 2 series with the Yankees. I don't think they're going to face Tarek Skubal in the Detroit series, so perhaps that's good news. But they'll probably get Framber Valdez. So it's sorry about that. That was my phone. Somebody obviously doesn't realize we're streaming here. But I think they'll face Framber Valdez in that series, and so there is, you know, another top-tiered lefty that the Rangers are going to have to face. I will get back with all these people in just a moment. I think I'm going to have to run shorter than usual today because I've got an interview that I've got to do with top prospect Grady Emerson, who I saw play last night at Fort Worth Christian, and it was an actual reunion of Ranger greats at this game. I'll share this story real quickly with you. So Grapevine Faith was Fort Worth Christian's opponent. Fort Worth Christian's baseball team is managed by Rusty Greer, Rangers Hall of Famer. His first base coach is Curtis Wilkerson, former Ranger. And Grapevine Faith was playing Fort Worth Christian. They were also playing softball against one another on the softball field. And one of Grapevine Faith's players is Josh Hamilton's daughter. And so Josh was over there watching his daughter. So I got a chance to say hello to him, catch up with him for just a minute, let him be to watch his daughter. And then one of the scouts who was watching Grady Emerson play last night was Michael Choice of UTA and a former first-round pick himself. So it was a pretty cool little scene out there. So let me just wrap this up because I think that was Grady calling me, and I don't want to leave him hanging. And I apologize for the technical issues today. What I do want to say is that let me answer this one last question from Charles Tucker about, since the lasso is done after a hit, maybe you and John Blake can do the lasso at the end of that podcast. I don't think you want to see. Look, my lasso is fine. I'll do my lasso right now. You know, you aren't going to see the hips working, but trust me, my hips work. I'm a little bit worried about John. I don't know that he can get his hips and his arms moving in the same direction. So maybe we'll bring it up. The podcast this week had Mark McLemore who was a great conversation about 1996 team, the first Ranger team to get to the postseason, about his relationship with Johnny Oates and what Johnny Oates did for him. I'm not sure who our podcast guest will be next week, but the Rangers podcast is always available. The Sports Day Insider podcast pops every Wednesday. Kevin Sherrington and I and Joe Hoyt this past week broke down the Cowboys draft. I don't think any of us had them taking Malachi Lawrence with the 23rd pick, but I think we were all over the idea that they were either going to get Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles, and they did do that. But guys, I'm sorry I've got to run early this week. I will make it up to you next week. I won't double book myself. I apologize about that. Thanks for watching again. And listen, last thing, let's just share a moment. The Peyton Gray story is a great story. If you get a chance to read my story that I wrote on Peyton during spring training about being an undrafted player who played in the independent leagues, who played in Mexican ball, and was on the verge of getting his first call up this year as a almost 31-year-old. And then, last night, Sean McFarland wrote a great story on him making his major league debut. He's dealing with some personal issues too. His mom is going through chemotherapy for cancer. And so, Peyton's just an easy kind of story to root for. Had a great debut, for perfect inning, and his changeup is really fun to watch. So hopefully you'll tune into that over the weekend while you're watching the Rangers. Hopefully you'll be back here next week, and hopefully you'll follow us along at the Dallas Morning News. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the podcast.